Why don't we start with just a quick introduction? Tell me who you are and why am I talking to you?
My name is Alethea Avramis, and Renee, first, thank you for inviting me here today. I'm really excited to, always love talking with you, of course. And I am a VR producer, and I have been working in VR for the past 3.5 years now. And I kind of came to it probably like a lot of other people came to it, with just kind of through another industry that kind of guided me into it, that I couldn't really, once it caught my attention, I couldn't really break away from it. It was just something that I felt was kind of meant to be. And I've been really lucky over the past 3 years to work with some incredible companies and people and creators, and have been able to meet all sorts of people. So anyway, we can get into that, but I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I come from a traditional film background, and writing and directing and also producing. I went to film school at UCLA. So I kind of came into things very traditionally and had a really solid story background. And when I was in film school, I was always really obsessed with things that were one take, and films that kind of would play with the passage of time in interesting ways.
Can you give some examples of like?
I really love. Yeah, I mean, I when I saw like Gus Van Sant's Elephant, that was one film that really was interesting. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock also had that film Rope, that was like, I guess it's technically not one take, but it's like 4 shots. There were just things like that I was just always really drawn to, about the choreograph of it, and how theatrical things could also be, and how acting and sort of emotional intimacy could be explored through timing. And so that I was always really, really drawn to that. And actually there's a recent film that I think is on Netflix. It came out a few years ago. It's a German film called Victoria, that is a single take, and it's unbelievable. It's like a heist, and it follows this girl, and it's like an hour and a half long, and it's one take. It's incredible. Anyway, that's a more recent thing that was
and the connection between
inspiring.
Your interest in long take film and VR, I'm imagining, is that both of them have a way of a cut reminds you, or can remind you, that you're watching a movie, that you're not in that story.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like
or is there something else with your fascination with those types of movies and immersive art?
Well, I mean, I think it was the idea of, as you said, kind of not breaking that illusion, not breaking that idea that you're inside and totally engaged with a story. In those films that I referenced, like Elephant, for example, the camera a lot of the time is behind this kid, this main character, and you're following him through the school, and you know that you're just an observer, but you really feel like you're him in some ways. And I just found that really powerful, that I could feel like, not like I'm like on the outside kind of looking in, but that I was inside of the story. That was really powerful to me. So I was taking some meetings in LA here and there, and I just, somebody had like a DK1 or a DK2, and I just tried that for the first time, and it was like everything just kind of clicked. I was like, okay, how can I get into this? I was like, I have to find a way.
Do you remember what that experience was that you saw on the DK1 or DK2?
It was like some kind of prototype that this company was working on, but they showed me a few sort of like early, like a few early things that I think it was like that Jaunt had done. And I was like, okay, I mean, it wasn't a narrative story, right? But I could see that little like sprinkle, like the stardust, it was like that magic had kind of like come in to my world. And that was it. I was like, okay, I have to find a way to really, to me, it was about telling stories and conveying emotional truth. That was really what I thought could be very interesting.
Totally.
So so I started working for a company in Venice, California. Shortly after that, that was behind Rose Trochet's series called Perspective.
Okay.
That was at Sundance in 2015 and 2016. There were 2 episodes of that, and I was a producer on the second.
Experience about date rape. Am I remembering correctly?
Correct. Yeah, that was the first one. I was not the company had done that before I joined them officially. So I was a producer on the second one, which was a police brutality piece.
Oh, wow.
And it was live action. It was POV. It was 4 different perspectives. It was called Perspective, the Misdemeanor, and it was filmed in New York. And that experience was pretty profound for me in that I saw also from the acting side, because I really love actors and working with actors, and just that creative process with them, I think, is something really special. And I saw that in that medium, they could also be really free in a way that they were more like theater.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting to see too, because I was like, okay, this is also interesting for all of the collaborators that are part of this process. It's something really different, and it really forced them, I think, just from observing, to get outside of themselves in a different way too. And of course, it was very challenging to film something like that, both from like a emotional perspective, but also just from a simple logistical and choreography perspective. I mean, that was filmed on the streets of New York, in an area, Bed-Stuy, that's quickly becoming gentrified. And we had these 2 young African-American actors and 2 actors who were dressed as NYPD. And it was an intense shoot. And I also saw that like any artistic medium, when you're doing something that is saying something about our political climate, it's intense. But I thought that it was very interesting to put it into this medium, and it did something different, I think, than another medium could. And that has always been the thing. And that was actually a big takeaway from that first experience, was making something and thinking about things that can only be done in this medium, that they can't exist in any other medium. That is still the number one question that I ask myself when I'm evaluating projects or looking at projects that I want to get involved in some way. I'm always like, okay, like, can this be in any other medium? And what will make it unique? What will make it successful? And you probably know from watching so much VR and producing so much yourself, Renee, that the most successful experiences answer that question completely, that they really can exist in that medium uniquely.
So you went from Perspective, and then what was the next projects or series of projects that you've worked on? I'm curious to know, like, how your approach to VR has changed from that first project to what you're working on now.
Yeah. Well, that project was live action. So that was sort of getting my feet wet in 360 video. And from there, I joined a company that was at the time, it was called, actually it still is called Okio Studio, with the folks that I still currently collaborate with, Atlas 5. 2 of the members of Atlas 5, Antoine K-Roll and Pierre Zandrowitz, had a studio called Okio that was based in Paris, that had done a lot of like branding and advertising, but also did some narrative work. And they produced something a couple of years ago called Alteration that was also live action, but it had a lot of CGI and VFX in it. And I was involved with that project a little bit, and I saw that the technical pipelines, just sort of like speaking generally about producing this sort of thing, that was the next step for me, was digging into the technical, because I didn't have a technical background. As I said, I really came from more of like the writing and the story side of things. And that has been the biggest leap for me, even to today. It continues. And that's the greatest learning process for me. Learning process in a great way, in a challenging way, so many different things. I have realized and really learned that to work in this medium, it's not like in film or something where you can say, okay, that's the cinematographer's job, or that's so-and-so's job, and they deal with that, and I have my kind of like window. I think to really have a global view and a comprehensive view, and to make great work, you have to have a command. Even if you're not the one doing it, you have to at least understand a little bit more of the process.
Well, and from a
I think
the main thing that I found is that you need to understand cost and time, right? Like how expensive
yes,
is the thing, and how long is it going
yes,
and how many people do I need to hire for it, right? Like it's those types of things.
yeah,
It's like a form of abstraction where you don't really need to know so much how the sausage is made at like a very detailed level, but you need to have sort of a sense of scale, scope, trajectory, velocity, like those types of things.
It's true. And in that sense, that does mirror more the traditional, like, okay, like it's going to take X amount of time, which is X amount of dollars, which is, you kind of can back into things that way. But I do feel, also speaking as a woman, I do feel that it is very important to have a knowledge, and maybe not necessarily a command, but to have at least a working knowledge of being able to talk to your developers, talk to the creative team on a level that will make the project the best that it can be. I think on every level, from the visuals to the sound to whatever it is.
Do you feel like as a woman, you need to like prove that you've got the chops more? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, but just having that kind of comprehensive knowledge, I just think I just feel more confident going into meetings and in rooms where I have more of an understanding of the process, and I don't necessarily that I can really talk to people on a deeper level. To me, it's always been an important thing. I think there are plenty of women, of course, who are developers, but in terms of the people I've worked with, it has mostly been men on the tech side of things. I just feel more confident, for me, having a little bit more knowledge and being able to talk about things on a deeper level. So that I think has been really the number one thing for me in terms of a challenge, and what I've taken with me from project to project as they get more involved or complicated or more like artistically ambitious. That's been kind of the big takeaway for me.
So what are you working on now? Like what's like talking about like ambitious and bigger and more complicated? Like what are the things that you're tackling at the moment that you feel like are really pushing yourself and pushing the medium?
There's a couple of things. Well, one is a project that you're familiar with, that it was in DevLab, and that Nico, if he's still sitting next to you, that his partner in crime, Mercedes. He's there. Perfect. Well, hi.
Oh, I muted that. They said hello. I was on mute.
Oh, hi.
that was Nico from Battlescar, and Ruben, my co-founder. Everyone on the line.
Oh, hey. Awesome.
They're
So
background.
Awesome. So Mercedes Arturo, who she of course wrote Battlescar. She's one of the writers on Battlescar with Nico, and is an amazing artist and filmmaker. She and I are working together on a project called Bedroom, which was part of the Kaleidoscope Oculus DevLab in November, that we're currently developing into sort of a larger scale immersive installation that will take you through a series of really memories and some short scenes between a grandmother and a child who you will see starting older, but then getting younger, sort of moving back through time. And we're planning on actually building out a physical space, which Mercedes has a background in production design and installation. She's amazing. She did, speaking of Sundance, since you're there, she did last year Battle Scars installation at New Frontier, which was fantastic. She built out this whole like squat room that was one of our characters from the piece, like her space. So anyway, we're kind of concepting it now and building it out as a really like a location-based sort of site-specific installation that that will take you through the memories of these two people. That is something that we're currently developing and working through the technical and deciding exactly what kind of form it's going to take. But I'm very excited about that and to work with Mercedes because she's a big talent.
Well, and this maybe taps into sort of like where we see things going because, you know, Mercedes projects and a lot of other projects I'm really excited about have this physical component where they're site specific often, where they are building out, you know, sets and physical apparatus that you can interact with. Like, so I'm curious, like, do you see that as something that is really hot and a lot of artists that you know of are excited about, or do you think it's just us? Like, what's your take on that?
I do. I think a lot of people are excited about this. I recently saw Unchained or Chained, the Victorian Nightmare, the Madison Wells piece that was in LA. I'm actually not sure if it's still playing or if they extended it, but I saw it around Christmas time, which was based on A Christmas Carol. And it was very, very interesting for me. First of all, I know that they sold out and I know that they extended it. So obviously there is a strong interest, I think, and a demand for something like that. When that was really a mixture of live theater with VR. And I have to say, it was funny. I came out of it. Well, okay, so you know the story of A Christmas Carol. So it takes you through, you're basically Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, and it's Christmas night and the three spirits visit you and you go through it. And what they did though is they found several ways to, I don't want to say anything too much as if people haven't seen it, but they personalize it in ways that I was really kind of astounded by. And it was really, I thought it was very effective. And I was driving home after the experience and there was somebody, as I was in my car, like getting onto the highway, there was somebody asking for money. And I gave them a little something. It was like, or I had some food and I gave them like some packages of some food. But I was like, wow, this actually felt, the experience had stayed with me in that moment. And I actually had this thought in that moment that it affected me more than Carne Reina.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
I think it did. I kind of like analyzed it after. So what's that?
Oh, so I'll have to tell Ethan that when I see him. I think he's here at Sundance. He's one of the producers.
Yeah, I know. I sent him an email after. I was like, this was really, really great. I thought you guys did like a great job. Yeah, I there's also something about physical touch, you know, that they had there because it was live actors that were playing these parts and these three different spirits. There was something also about that physical touch of someone that you can't really see, of course, and you don't know who they are, and you're probably never going to see them again, and you don't know their real identity. But there's something about that integration, I think, which brings down that human element, I think, that sometimes is missing with a lot of this work, because in a lot of ways it in and of itself, just by its nature, can be isolating. You know, it's a very singular experience. You put on if we're talking about VR, you know, you put on a headset and you have an experience. While it's incredibly powerful, it's individually, in most cases, individually experienced. And so with these sort of live theater hybrid pieces, I think that there's just incredible opportunity. I also felt like I could be more free and be like, I was also of course playing a part, but I was myself in some ways, and I felt like I could be more free and express. So I think there's just enormous potential, and I'm personally excited about exploring more things like that. I'm also working with Lily Baldwin and Sashka Unseld on another immersive dance project.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's also in early stages, but that's being produced with Solar from the World VR Forum as well.
Okay, awesome.
So yeah, that'll also kind of explore and push some boundaries, I think, of body and movement and those sorts of things. So
Sam
yeah.
Roberts from Indiecade, and his one of his big rants is about embodied experience. Things that get you in your body, remind you that you have a body. I think I was just having a conversation with, I think, Brad, who we're staying with here from Unity, and we were talking about how you have this trend where people have been doing like less and less and less physical movement. If you think about like games, right? You've got this like super ergonomic controller in your hand, and you're probably on a couch, and you like don't move at all. And we've talked to Samantha Hinderclaws about this too, where it's like, there's this funny, weird juxtaposition between sort of the dominant trend, which is to like be more and more sedentary when you're consuming entertainment, even in like the gaming area. And then you've got VR, which is this promise of getting you up and moving around and engaging your space. And we're sort of, debating whether or not like that's foolish. Like, does the fact that like most people, who are engaging in entertainment are, physically not embodied in their, their body and moving around, or does the trend continue until it doesn't? And are we going to see like a reversal where people are going to start losing weight by playing Beat Saber, and it's gonna they're actually going to get off their couch around? Like, I think that's a really interesting thing to think about.
It's very, very interesting. I was playing Beat Saber like a week ago and thinking about this, the same thing too. And I think that there was this idea, at least in the beginning or a few years ago, even like, okay, this is just going to make us very sedentary and kind of remove these sort of opportunities we have for interaction in the real world. But I think now I think there's a lot of opportunity on a lot of different levels, so I'm interested to see where this is going to go. But the embodiment thing is a very interesting question about, some people, yes, really want to feel like they're having an embodied experience in a physical body. And I can totally understand, like, I'm trying to think like in my own experience. I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, well, there's
what you're kind of gravitate towards, but yeah.
There's like, if it's the end of the day and you're exhausted, like you probably are going to be in like a more sedentary mode for consuming your entertainment, right? Because you just don't have energy. But I think, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I hope.
Yeah, we will.
I hope people continue to make experiences that are really engaging, that get you off your tuchus and up and moving around. Because
I hope so too. Yeah.
That feels less dystopian.
Yes, definitely.
Get your take on where the sort of industry is going from like more of like a financial perspective. Like, so as a producer, a lot of the hustle that you do is around fundraising and, together a project and trying to get partners on board. Like, so where do you think, like give me a snapshot of sort of like what the industry's been doing over the last year and what you think like 2019 is gonna
These are tough questions. That's tough. I was a little discouraged by 2018. Just when you hear of any studios that are closing, or
Future Lighthouse, or like who are you thinking?
Future Lighthouse, and I think the smaller indie ones are always the ones that kind of get to me, because that's where like my heart is. And I also believe that those are the people that are going to establish this industry.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you kind of think about it, I always compare it to film because that's kind of my world, even though you shouldn't really do that. But if I think about like the 1970s in film, where you really had like, you had Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola and these sort of like giants of cinema that were creating work that, like the blockbuster was created. Then you had like The Godfather. I mean, you had these films that sort of cemented it. And those, I mean, they were young then, of course, these guys, this sort of like wave, I mean, Scorsese, all these guys, they created this language, I think, and they were independent. They really were. And they were taking risks, and they were doing things that created these masterpieces of cinema and cemented a lot of what the industry is as we know it today. I saw Francis Ford Coppola speak in December, and he was incredible, and he talked kind of about those days, and
it was
really inspiring.
Documentary on Spielberg on HBO. I think it was called Spielberg.
You know what? People have been telling me to watch that, and I still haven't seen it. Is it fantastic? It's fantastic, right?
But the part that I liked about it was, it covered, that period of time really well from Spielberg's, vantage point. But, he was part of that group of artists that were, they were independent. They all had, very unique voices and opinions about what movies ought to be. It was just seemed like such an exciting time period. And it felt very similar to the vibe in the VR AR space, where there's like a handful of, really amazing artists that are all friends that, collaborate on each other's work and give feedback and are very supportive of each other. And the only thing that feels different is that, like, in the 70s, they still had the film business had already been around for, almost years, right? Like,
True.
years, pretty solid industry there. So there was money to be made. And when the studio system was collapsing and that made way for these independent studios and independent artists, there was still like, a good amount of money to operate in. Whereas the industry right now
that's a little bit different. It's totally different from a financial perspective. I guess what I was getting at is that these guys were able to make, and of course there were women as well, but they were really able to kind of make their mark by taking these creative risks. And I want to see that so much more in this industry as well, that it's being artist driven, that from the ground up it's really being built, sort of the foundation of it is going to be artist driven. And that is always tough when we're talking about finances. That's always really, really tough. Especially, I mean, if you think about it, it's like such a triple whammy. It's like an industry that doesn't exist or didn't exist before, as you pointed out, with a lot of times people that nobody has heard of, with the that, like young artists and with technology that a lot of people don't own yet, or that, so if you're talking about financial risk, it's kind of like, okay, why would I invest in something like this? But in that sense, the individuals and the companies that I think are taking risks in this space are doing so, for a lot of different reasons. But you see companies like, one company that we're lucky enough to work with now too is, on Gloomy Eyes, which is premiering now at Sundance, is Riot. And the really unique thing about Riot is, is that, and they're really coming into the space. I mean, they were in the space before, but kind of like they've really shifted. And of course they're owned by Verizon, and they're part of Oath. And companies like that are really interesting because you see that it's like digital media, let's say, that industry that's being kind of the first ones to like step forward and say like, okay, we're gonna put money into these things. It's not coming from the traditional media world
Yeah, it's
at
really
all.
like the
Really.
most traditional studios, you know,
Right.
put money into projects, or if they
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
it's tied to like, the marketing budgets of a film that's coming out. And
Correct.
very,
Right.
very challenging to, and this also just doesn't make sense to them to party with, little, or to partner with little third party studios. Like, it's an unfamiliar territory for them. Uh, so it's really just a couple. It's like a handful of players that sort of come in and sometimes go, that have supported artists, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
a lot of different
Yeah.
players, but the big ones, it's Oculus, it's HTC, it's Riot now, and it was a couple of other people that, sort of pulled back. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So you see that happening, but I think moving forward, I really see um, VR and XR in this industry as I almost approach it more as like fine art
Yeah.
in some ways. I mean, there are many different aspects and facets of the industry, but I think in terms of a financing perspective, what I'm pivoting more now towards, and what I think is interesting, at least specifically in the United States, is let's say like cultural institutions, academic institutions, foundations that are somehow connected to art,
Yeah.
as we museum art, installation art, that sort of world, I think is very relevant, I think, to us
I'm
as
particularly
producers right
interested
now.
in drafting off of cause like granting organizations and, universities and, I don't know, things like the Knight Foundation, like, they have money and they do put it into the arts. But the scale and scope of projects have to be pretty small for that. Like most of those grants are in
Yeah.
like 10,000,
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
$50,000 range,
Right.
and it takes a lot of time to piece that money together.
Yes.
Like I think that can work for a project, of a certain size and a certain scale.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to,
Definitely.
it's very easy to have a project expand beyond the ambition that those funding channels can cover. But
Oh, definitely.
I do think one thing that I'm really excited about, is this idea of, selling, limited quantities of a piece of work, just like you do in fine art. So, like Jacob, I'm going to butcher his last name, Kudenstein. I'm going to have to look it up. Sorry, Jacob. If anybody knows how to pronounce his full name, Jakob. Oh, come on. Everyone, this is making me look bad.
Jacob.
I'm gonna have to go to my email now and get it right. Man, why is my email? There we go. Jakob Kutsk-Steensen. There we go. He's great. He did Reanimator, and he did. He was with the technical artist that worked on Tree. There we
Oh
go.
yeah.
So he's really approaching this from the fine art perspective in terms of he'll like make like 4 limited edition prints basically of his project, and he'll sell each one for like $25,000. And
Yeah.
Rachel Rosen is doing a similar thing where it's very much in that tradition of having a limited supply, like a
Mhm.
a run of lithographic prints or something like that, and then selling them to collectors. I think that's a really interesting way for projects that are non-commercial and more on the artistic,
Mhm.
cultural impact kind of vein,
Yeah.
to maybe make some money as opposed to just relying on granting organizations. But tap into that.
Definitely. I had kind of like this like aha moment. This was now maybe even a couple of years ago when I went to see Carne Arena at LACMA. And there was this guy who I went to the cafe afterwards, and there was a guy getting a coffee, and we started talking, and he had just come out of it too. And he goes, yeah, this was actually my second time seeing this. I just love it so much. And he said, I went to the gift shop after the first time I went to see it. And he said, and I was like, I wanted to get I don't know, like a souvenir, like a magnet or a pen or something. And they were like, no, we don't sell any merchandise from Carne Arena. Like this is just, that's a decision that we have made, the creative team made, and LACMA made, just to, you can really kind of only experience it in that room, in that space. And of course it's, at this incredible art gallery in Los Angeles, and you can only see it in a couple of places, which to me is also part of a problem that not a lot of people can access it. But at the same time, it kind of had this like little light bulb go off for me. Like, okay, yeah, well, it's special, and you can only access it in that way. I don't think that every experience should be like that. I love commercial stuff, and I am excited for the day when things will make more money, VR will make more money, and this industry will be able to bring in more on the financial side. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting sort of thing in terms of thinking about it like as a commodity, like you would art.
So when you're reading the tea leaves, when do you think we'll see projects more reliably making money? Or there's been a handful of projects that have made money, but like when do you feel like there'll be an audience that's large enough to have commercial projects succeed on a more interesting scale?
Well, I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the new headsets that are coming out.
Yeah.
Like the Quest. I mean, I'm interested to see if that will just lead to more consumer adoption and in-home adoption. Because in my experience, when you show VR to people, just speaking about VR, when you show it to people who have never done it, most of them like immediately want to go out and buy whatever they can get their hands on to see more things and experience more things. I mean, there's a couple friends of mine and people that I just know personally that really had no connection to any of this, but they just were really impacted by it and they wanted to see more of it. So I really think that I hope that that's going to potentially change a lot of things. So I'm hopeful about that.
I'm really curious. As like on paper, it looks like what I've always thought like the consumer breakthrough headset would need to look. It's competitive. It seems to reduce a good amount of the friction. Not having tethered to a computer, having it be something that could like live in a drawer in your living room that you could take out when do VR. It's not perfect, but I'd be really curious to see what adoption. Like for me, it's like I always think of it as the iPhone moment. Like smartphones were around for a long time, and then the iPhone came out, and that was when it was like the tipping point. But part of that story and analogy that you forget is that in the first year, the iPhone only sold like 1 million units. Like it wasn't like the runaway success that people remember it. It certainly did take off like a rocket ship, but it was instantaneous. I think
it did build. It totally built, but also at the same time, there was so much money being poured into dev stuff, so that everybody would want. They would have to have the iPhone to be able to play. I don't know what, Candy Crush or something, whatever they wanted to do. But
it also didn't come for at least a year after the launch, because it might have even been more, because
I think it was more.
They didn't even have the apps on it.
Exactly. So I think it was like kind of a combination of those things that well, I don't want to speculate exactly what led to the iPhone success, but I think it was a combination of several of those things. So I am hoping that these headsets are really gonna change things. I really do. And just, I know everybody says this in terms of content, but again, I always go back to like, if we can keep this artist driven with an artist foundation of really, I don't want to say telling stories, because it's more than that. And I think it's deeper than that. And the most impactful experiences for me have been a combination of maybe not necessarily telling a story, but giving a feeling, giving a feeling of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing with this medium one of the reasons why I remain working in it. Despite a lot of the challenges, I think it's very special.
So, Alethea, are you taking on any new projects? And if so, how can other Kaleidoscope members reach out to you?
I am taking on some other projects. I'm also starting to work on a couple of things that are not necessarily AR, VR, but they're just more like immersive experiences. I am.
The Meow Wolf thing comes in.
Yeah, I'm collaborating. I'm collaborating.
Most recent.
Yeah, I can't talk a lot about this specific project, but I am working with Meow Wolf on something for their Las Vegas location.
Cool.
Which is opening this year.
So people can get in touch with you. What's the best way? Do you want them just to message you on Kaleidoscope, or do you want to?
Kaleidoscope is fine, or I can give my email. How can I do that?
There's a chat feature here that you could just throw it in there if you want.
Oh, cool. I didn't see that. Oh, there's some people. Oh, hi, Jean Pascal. People have been writing there. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just put my personal email address in here.
Okay, cool.
And anyone can email me. I'm definitely open to speaking about new projects.
Well, and then this is the point of the Friday forum where we open it up to questions for the people on the line. So if anyone has a question, you can throw it into this chat log, or
this is cool.
Raise your hand, and I'll bring you in as a panelist, and you can show up on video and talk directly. So if anyone has any specific questions for Alethea, now is the time to ask them. And this is also a good time for you to be thinking about any updates that you want to share with everyone on the line. If you have any questions or need help with something, jump in the chat log or raise your hand, and I will.
I just want to respond to because I just saw what Jean Pascal wrote. I don't know if he's still here, but
I'm sure it'd be useful.
But yeah, I think everybody can see what he wrote, right? Or can I only see that? Everyone can see that. Yeah. Okay. Just about the co-production model. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, it is very unique to the US, kind of what we were talking about, because obviously the US does not have a lot of public financing models the way that Europe does, where you can access artistic funds, but also regional funds, technology funds. There's so many different unique things. I mean, as you pointed out, one of the reasons why Atlas V has been successful is because they have sort of embraced this co-production model, and they're able to finance projects. I mean, speaking of, like, Battlescar is a good example of that. Yep. Projects, that have been through development also financed from Europe, which is great because you're able to finance, like, let's say, a prototype, and then potentially bring it back to the US or to other countries and package it and fully finance it after that point. So co-production, I think, is something that's necessary for this industry. And I also think, but it can be, I think for US based creators, it can seem a little daunting and challenging, and you don't necessarily know exactly, okay, like, who do I talk to and where do I go to? And Europe is also complicated, the system, and it also takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
a local partner
waiting involved.
Thoroughly. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the best things is I've had the opportunity and been lucky enough to travel to a lot of these. There's so many conferences all over the world all the time, but a lot of them, if some of the ones that, or the festivals like Sundance or Tribeca, where a lot of the industry really, really comes to, even if they're not necessarily showing something or exhibiting something, just meeting people, I think, is spending that money and going there, I think for a few of these events is really worth it to
make a big difference. Yeah. There's so much, it's so hard to filter out the signal from the noise, and whatever it is you're trying to do, like actually showing up and meeting people and having them get to know you, it builds trust, and it seems to almost always be the difference. Like, it's so difficult to to make it work if you're doing everything remotely, especially like, I mean, I live in Portland where there's like no industry, like there's no industry.
Right.
So I have to come to events like Sundance and Tribeca, or else, you know, I have no way of, you know, becoming friends with people that I want to work with. So we've got another question from Dennis.
Oh yeah, I just saw that. Okay, you said you were interested in the VR art projects. What characteristics of a project prototype could make you decide to produce it? That's a great question. I think, well, some stuff that I have seen, I think, like I said before, it gives you that sort of like sense of magic or wonder. And it is not necessarily based on interactivity. You know, a lot of these things are interactive in unique ways, or they do something maybe new or unexpected with interactivity. That to me, I think is something that really I'm drawn to that in terms of like VR, more artistic type projects of like, okay, how can I engage with it in a way that's like personal and meaningful or just unique. Yeah, that's something that I look for.
We've got a question from Olivia.
Oh yeah, what other advice for young XR artists finding their way?
So I guess aside from showing up to events.
Yeah, aside from showing up to events, I mean, I was going to say too that it's like any other industry. It's an industry that's built on relationships, as we were talking about, like having those connections to people. I think there's a lot of opportunity, whether it is online in a Facebook group or in person. I think that one really great thing about this industry is that it has mobilized a lot more quickly than I was expecting. A little over 3 years ago when I first started working this, I didn't know a lot of people. And, you know, over time I've gotten to know a lot of people, but there's so many opportunities. It's really, there are a lot of people who have stepped up, and like yourself, Renee, too, like with Kaleidoscope is an example of that. But having sort of like forums and opportunities to discuss things and challenges, I have found that the industry is quite collaborative, especially at the, you know, from a creator's, I think, point of view too. I think people really enjoy seeing each other's work and successes.
Yeah.
I think successes are really celebrated, which I think is great, because when there is an experience that is very successful on any level, that's good for everyone. It's really good for everyone. Yeah. I see that someone else asked, Mateo, at what stage of a project do you jump in? From experience, a project can take quite a while to take its final shape. Yes, that's totally true. At what stage of a project? I mean, it's all stages. I mainly have been joining projects in the beginning and kind of crafting and concepting things from the beginning all the way to the end, but that's not necessarily the case all the time. And you're right. Projects take a long time to take shape, especially with this, because also the technology is constantly changing. So maybe you have one way of approaching something sort of, and you have this idea and you have a whole plan, and then a month or two later, it just kind of like takes like a hard left swerve. You know, so things can really change quite quickly. But I think it's at any stage of a project. Creatively, I typically come in at the beginning, and then you know, also I financially, if I'm consulting or whatever, can come in at a later point in a project if they're looking for like a gap in their budget or something like that. Yeah.
And then we've got Kim. Looks like she's shared a VR dojo that she made. Cool. Very neat. I'll have to check.
Oh, cool. Oh, so I can click on that. Okay, yeah. Awesome.
I think that'll be a good
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
sharing. Thanks, Kim. That's awesome.
A question from Anne. Interested in experiences that combine VR with live theater. And she's curious if you see a demand for this, and also how you would advise working with theater companies who want to involve complex tech like VR.
Yeah, I mean, I do see, demand is a hard question, I think, which is the demand, but I think that there is an intense interest, let's say, in these sort of hybrid experiences. Like I was talking about the chained I can't, this is so bad. I can't remember if it's called Chained or Unchained. That experience was, anyway, yeah, also there was one that was called Jack that Baobab did, that was at Tribeca last year, that I thought was really interesting. But the thing about both of those experiences that I want to point out is that they're based on stories that a lot of people have a familiarity with. So like Jack and the Giant Beanstalk, you kind of know that this guy's going to come and try and like sell you these beans. And then in this Christmas Carol one, you know that there's like three spirits that are going to come visit you. And I think that's one of the reasons these things are successful. People can connect with them is because there is a familiarity with it. That being said, another thing I am currently developing is I'm working with a Greek theater group, like a experimental theater group that's been around for a while, on developing something in Europe that would be like a traditional, like come from like Greek mythology, that would maybe be like a hybrid kind of live theater experience. So in terms of advising, working with theater companies, I'm just diving into this now myself, and we are kind of figuring out exactly how this collaboration would work. Like they have their way of working, and they've been doing it for a really long time. And I'm kind of coming to them and saying like, let's like do something different, and let's, see how we can collaborate, and let's, and they had never seen any VR before, and now they're, understanding and kind of seeing the potential a little bit more. So I think in terms of the tech stuff, that stage is I'm not quite there myself with this particular project. So maybe I'll have more to say in a at the end of the year or something like that. But I think it's
you should chime in at the end when you've learned how to.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's about also finding like this theater company that I'm potentially working with is they're very experimental. They go around the world doing things that are like very wacky. So they're open to that sort of risk taking and exploring things from a story perspective that's really deconstructed.
Yeah.
So.
And it looks like we've got a couple other questions in here. We've got one from Trent Spivey. Beyond the pricing of hardware, do you think there are any strategies that the broad immersive community could adopt to bring our awesome medium to folks that would otherwise never see it and potentially be positively impacted by it?
Hang on, let me read that again. Beyond the pricing of hardware. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not as familiar with experiences that are more on the like the medical side and like psychological and education side, but I think that education in general is going to be a big part of this medium moving forward in terms of future generations. I think if children and young people are exposed to it through education, that's going to be like a good way to get them not just familiar with it, but excited about it. And I mean, kids already know what to do with this stuff. I mean, they know how to, you give them the touch controllers and they're like, okay, you don't have to tell them anything. So I think like on the education side, things that are, let's say, scientific in nature or offer some kind of like travel, something like that. I mean, I'm excited about the potential there in terms of adoption, having a wider adoption.
Yeah, I totally agree. Other software other than Unity that offer easy interactive interaction into 360 movies?
360 movies.
Unity is really the one. I mean, we use
I'm mostly exclusively working with Unity on the projects that I'm working in. I mean, just the stuff that they also are offering now, as opposed to even a year ago, and the stuff that's going to be coming out and the plugins and everything over the next year, I think are just creatively. I think you're just going to be able to do pretty much kind of whatever you're imagining.
And Unity is just one of the handful of companies that have been super supportive of artists.
Very.
And
That's actually, and I didn't mention them before. They're very very supportive.
Brad thinks so too.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you.
Hey, I'm Brad. So I run product for AR and VR at Unity. I've just been hanging out with Renee.
That was like perfect timing.
Listening in. So yeah, stoked. Actually, can I ask a really quick question?
Yeah, jump in.
What are those things that that are coming over the next year that you're kind of stoked about?
The stuff that you told us about at DevLab.
Okay.
Maybe you should explain that. I was just so nervous. He's sitting right next to you, Renee.
I've not been here the entire time. So Renee and I are staying together at Sundance, and I was just coming down the stairs.
Hashtag no pressure.
On my way.
No pressure.
On my way out. and then I thought I'd just step in and
No, that's perfect. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in terms of the things we're excited about with Unity. I mean, from my perspective, we, it's mostly, to be totally honest, Brad, it's just the fact that it's become such a standard. Like we do co-productions with people all over the world, right? And the fact that like everybody knows it and everyone's done multiple projects in it, it's kind of like beyond any new features, it's just the fact that it's a standard, and that's such a nice thing to have in something where there's so many unknowns.
So it makes it easier to form teams.
Yeah, totally.
Shift around.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's from the producer's perspective, as the person who's not actually like touching it. Like, I just like that, like we've all agreed, like, okay, we're just going to use Unity, and Unity's a cool company that we feel good like working with. Like, it's so nice to have one of the many, many variables that you are always having to struggle with, like, pretty much like settled.
Yeah, the collaboration is a huge part of it, and like I said, it is a very like global industry where you do have teams that are kind of can be spread out a lot of places, and it kind of helps congregate all of that. It's super helpful, and I mean the Unity folks that I've been lucky enough to work with are really supportive and great, and really I think want to dig into the specifics of your projects and see how their tech can really help bring it to life in, with the vision of the creators.
Yeah.
So that's been great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we let you go? This went really well. I love how many questions people have asked.
Yeah, that's been great. Thank you for asking questions. Fantastic.
And thank you for Sweden. I know you were about to take an ice bath. So we'll go take an ice bath now.
Hardly. Oh man. Yes, I'm in Gothenburg, Sweden. For anyone who wasn't in the beginning, there's a film festival that actually opens today, and so I'm here for the week. But yes, it's quite cold. It's a Nordic winter.
Wrong time to visit Sweden.
What's that?
Oh, wrong time to visit Sweden. You're supposed to go in the summer when it's like.
You know what? I've actually only ever been in the summer before. I've been a few times and it's always been in the summer. Yeah. But actually, I was also thinking it was going to be really dark the whole time, but it's not as dark. It's not really that dark.
Well, Sweden is very long. That's what people don't realize. It's like, in the main cities.
Yeah. This is pretty far south. Yeah. But yeah, and I mean, in terms of closing, well, thank you for having me again, and thank you for your questions. And please feel free to email me. My email address is in the chat box. And no, I'm just excited about what folks are creating. And I think I just, in terms of just going back to like taking those risks, I don't think that there's any need to censor yourself or feel like something is not possible. There are a few things technically, yes, maybe at this stage that are not possible, but we're getting there with a lot of things. And so I think it's just like really thinking about what you want to do, what feeling you want to give to people, and starting from that, I think is a good place to start as you're thinking about developing projects.
And that's a good place to end it. Thank you so much, Alethea. You're one of my favorite producers, and you're totally rocking it. And you got the best hair. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone. See you next Friday.
Bye. Have a great Sunday.
We have Asad Malik, who's not going to flake this time, I promise.
Oh, he's amazing.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I got an Uber here heading down to the main street.
Oh, okay. Cool, man.